j'ai du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Speaking of momentum, I do think that perhaps the president may have been a bit enraged yesterday morning after getting the ratings from his final night, but also the polling out of ABC News, the Washington Post, showing that, his approval rating actually went down and Joe Biden's went up over the two conventions.
Well, his tweet storm certainly showed he was reacting to something. We will get to the violence and unrest in Portland in just a moment, but there is fresh new polling following both the Democratic and Republican national conventions showing President Trump's favorability slipping, while Joe Biden steadily climbs. In the latest ABC News Ipsos poll, Trump's favorability sits at 31%, down 4 points since the DNC. 59% have an unfavorable opinion of the president. 46% hold a favorable view of Biden, up 6 points since before the DNC. 40% have an unfavorable view of the former vice president. And when looking at President Trump's handling of the coronavirus, 35% approve, while 63% disapprove. Who are the 35% is all I want to know. Yeah. Meanwhile, the latest Morning Consult poll shows voters edging back toward President Trump off the heels of the Republican National Pageant or Convention. Joe Biden now holds a 6-point lead over President Trump, 50 to 44%. That's down from the 10-point lead he held heading into the convention on August 23rd. But the latest USC Dornsife on Friday found Biden at 53% to Trump's 41%, a margin of 12 points. So there you go.
Yeah, so Jonathan Lemire, a lot of people around the White House were thrilled with what happened during whatever you want to call last week's RNC events. The polls actually, a couple of polls showing within the margins that things may have gotten a little better for the president. But if you look at the ABC News Washington Post approval poll and the rating, Donald Trump's approval ratings actually went down. Joe Biden's went up, and I think pretty considerably. Biden's up 6 points, and his unfavorability down 3 points, which is showing to me at least, coming out of this convention, the story seems to be, and I would guess that people inside the White House would be thinking this too, and they may not admit it to the president, but it's got to be frustrating to them that despite the tens of millions of dollars in unfavorable ads thrown at Joe Biden over the past 6 months, despite the fact the president even got impeached over trying to pull in a Ukrainian leader and a whole defense spinning over him to try to besmirch the reputation of Joe Biden, Biden's numbers just keep going up as far as approval rating goes. We're going to have to start calling him Teflon Joe.
Joe, I think is striking in the last few days, Democrats I've talked to, and perhaps you had the same experience, there seems to have been sort of a collective freakout among Democrats since the Republican convention ended, suggesting that this race was suddenly hurtling Trump's way. But the polling doesn't really back that up at all, at least not yet. As you say, some polls suggest perhaps slight movement towards the president. But let's remember, Joe Biden walked into these conventions with a pretty substantial and, more importantly, stable lead. There hasn't been much that has happened since the onset of the pandemic, and certainly since the aftermath of George Floyd's killing and the president's walk across Lafayette Square, that has really changed the fundamentals of this race. Yes, it has dipped and moved a little bit around the margins to this point. And yes, both sides privately will acknowledge it has tightened some, but both sides privately, and in some cases publicly, acknowledge that Joe Biden is still winning. And forget the national polls, but in the battleground states that really matter, he still has a 4, 5, 6, or 7 point lead in all of the states, perhaps save North Carolina. Now, obviously, it does seem like Republicans, and you're right, the White House was pleased with the staging of the events last week. We are still going to see the aftermath of that in the coming days, and what we don't know yet are how the events of Kenosha and Portland are going to change things. We know the president is traveling to Kenosha, Wisconsin tomorrow. Joe Biden is going to speak on the unrest in America and how President Trump has added to that today in a speech in Pennsylvania, and his aides are working on his own visit to Wisconsin potentially later this week. But right now, this race still remains the same. Now, it's fully joined. It's on now, as they say. Joe Biden is resuming his campaigning. The president and his team are pleased about that. They feel like they've pushed Biden out of, quote, his basement sooner than he wanted. They think that the more he's out there in the public, perhaps that will lead to some sort of gaffe or other blunder that could close the race. But right now, Joe, we are still where we are a month or two ago. Maybe it's closed slightly, but Joe Biden is in the enviable position 2 months out. He's winning.
Yeah, Reverend Al, here we are moving into September. Things are pretty much the same. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. It seems to me the only thing that has changed, if you look at the polling since 2 weeks of conventions, is that Donald Trump's approval rating ticked down slightly and Joe Biden's approval rating went up a good bit. He's sitting at 46% approval rating. Those disapproving of him went down 3 points.
Clearly, Joe Biden rising with approval and the president coming down is bad news for the White House, no matter how they spin it. They're now playing this, we're in survival mode, trying to spin it as if this is some advancement. The thing that I observed, Joe, over the weekend, we had the big march in Washington Friday, which was probably the biggest civil rights march in the last several years. The energy, I mean, you have to remember now, we had this on a work day in the middle of a pandemic. And for tens of thousands of people to come out is a signal to the White House that people are energized to come out to vote. They will come out and stand up, and did it peacefully because the tone is set at the top, unlike the president is doing to his supporters. Not one incident with several 100,000 people there, and you have no problems, no incidents, and people ready to come and stay out all day. That's a signal what they will do election day. So if I was the White House, between the polling and the turnouts, I think I would be very concerned because it shows a determination against this kind of divisive, hate-filled atmosphere that this president has established.
It is Monday, the 31st of August of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Yes, we sliced and diced and we put something together from all that has been left over from the weekend, and there is so much that comes on the weekends now. We used to never get these kinds of deliveries. We'd be using everything up. Well, the Blue Plate Special is what we have, and the Blue Plate Special on Mondays is River City Hash Mondays. So, sometimes we put a little bit of egg in there to, bind it together. Sometimes. There is a small company, I think it's small, but is selling its wares in the Grand Central Market in Los Angeles. And I got to say, before I really get into it, is how dare they? But they're selling a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that they take the crust off. So I guess it's Incrustable or Uncrustable. I never ate that BS back in the day. But regardless, they're selling it for $8. $8 effing dollars. And I think of, really nice family-type food stalls in the Grand Central Market. And they've been kicked out for that. Please. Get out of the Grand Central Market. Dude, God, please. They could have, they say, well, it's gourmet because we make our own peanut butter and our own jelly. Oh, please. Who hasn't ever canned jam? Huh? Everybody does that. Is it now gourmet? You know what would make it gourmet? And I actually had some positive feedback on my suggestion. Instead of making it with the doughy, gummy center of the bread, make it with the crust. Take all that crust, make it into a little bit of bread pudding. Put some rum creme anglaise in there. Then make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with that. Put it on a panini press. Cook it up a little bit, and then you can call it gourmet. I'd probably even put a little bit of, raspberry whipped cream in there. Right on the side. Dollop. Maybe even a sprig of mint. Though I would prefer the lemon thyme that I have growing in my garden. Oh, is it so fragrant? It is. Well, on to the news of the world. Ratcliffe is a Russian rat, and so is that Rosenstein guy. I told you. Oh, is it Rosenstein? Rosenstein puts the squash on the counter intel investigation. Doesn't tell anybody in the FBI. Everybody thought, well, Mueller's going to handle it. Mueller was told, you leave that alone. That's outside of your purview. And it was, and now here we are. We have this imbecile Ratcliffe as the DNI. Oh, we are not going to sit down and give anybody as elected who we haven't vetted from our side any kind of intel about foreign election interference because of the leaks. The Congress is being blamed for, I guess, releasing a public document. I mean, they didn't even release it. They cited it. But according to Trump, that's a leak. Because mobsters do not believe that public documents in a representative democracy should be allowed. While at the same time, threatening Portland, Oregon, if you don't clean up your act, if you don't kiss my ass, I'm coming in there, I'm going to kick yours. So yeah, they sent in a Trump terrorist caravan into Portland, Oregon to kick people's ass, and one of their Patriot Prayer guys got plugged and is dead. And I don't know. If it's one of our people, whatever that means, if it was Antifa, whoever did that should be tried, convicted, incarcerated to the fullest extent of the law. Whomever it is. Of course, their side, and we know who their side is, they collect vast sums of money to protect their murderers because they're very fine people. They clean graffiti off of property, and property is always more valuable than a life. So I kind of think this Patriot Prayer guy might have got plugged by one of his own guys by mistake. There was always this infighting among these idiots. Who knows? They're a gang. And which brings us to this issue of Patriot Prayer, Proud Boys, 3%ers, and the cops in Portland. I don't think that the cops are necessarily infiltrating the Patriot Prayer, the Proud Boys, and the 3%ers. Why would they have to? They're already cops. Okay, So you got those people working for him. This kid is still being delayed from being extradited. We don't know if we want to extradite this kid back. He might have been trying to protect himself. Why would we send him back to that tribe over there of cannibals? They're cannibals. We, the Democratic Party, are the enemy of the state. Vlad and his crime cartel are best buddies and partners with our crime cartel that's running this government. Donald Trump is a wartime president, and apparently the American people are his enemy, and he's at war with us. Oh, do I have to presume that the people who are fighting his war in their trucks, their flags, their paintball guns, and their actual long rifles that fire deadly bullets that kill people? No, it's not their fault. Are they supposed to be called Americans? They are the toxic third. They are the stormtroopers, the brown shirts, having a rolling crystal locked in the light of day. And then we'll have a Reichstag fire. All this mayhem is caused by white people, but the black people are going to be blamed. And then we'll have that called the Reichstag fire. And the next thing we'll know, we'll have all the enabling acts enabled because only parts of them have been now. Every step of the way, Moscow Mitch gives another enabling act to this guy. That Deripaska money went more than just to an aluminum facility in Kentucky. Ratcliffe, Rosenstein, the whole Trump crime cartel. Do we look forward and forget about how we got here? If we're lucky enough to wrest our democracy back from this Trump crime cartel? Or do we hold them to account? Do we put them on trial? It doesn't have to be a public show trial. It doesn't even have to be political. We're talking about actual RICO crimes. We're talking about lopping off parking meters and cracking them open to get the cudas out. Do they still do that, or is it all digital now? Well, okay, so they're going to get the bitcoins. Whatever it is, we are in deep trouble, and the only way to keep them from gaming this is to vote in vast numbers. And I keep telling everybody, the silent majority is not these loudmouths with their loud trucks and their paintball guns and their long rifles that shoot deadly bullets that kill people in mass quantities. No, we're not going to allow that. Ballots over bullets. The sleeping giant is awakening, has been awakened. I don't think people are very happy with Donald Trump threatening a U.S. city. We're going to come in and clean you up. Oh, is that what you were trying to do over the weekend? Now, of course, in Kenosha, it's a little bit different. They don't really need some outside agitators to do anything. They got their own cops. And I don't know, their fusion center agreements. All right. I think there's going to need to be a cleansing. Yeah. If there's any kind of Russian activity in our government, we need to root that out. Or Israeli. Rosenstein is working now in private practice for an Israeli firm that has already been implicated by our intelligence apparatus as being part of this whole Trump get elected thing in 2016. Everybody gets their little payoff now, doesn't it? Don't they? That's how a crime cartel works. And I guess Mueller, being a Boy Scout, was he doddering? Was he the equivalent? I'm all of a sudden I'm having a brain log. But Nixon put out a guy that was pretty much on the last legs of his, shall we say, full capacity before it began to become completely diminished. Let's not say he was at full, but he wasn't completely diminished. To give a report on there was no crimes involved here, and here's proof. Whatever it was, platitudes or whatnot. Mueller didn't really give platitudes. He basically said this was the extent of my investigation, and that was in Congress's hands. And when you got a crime cartel, you don't need to answer a subpoena. What do you think this is? Law and order? We make up the laws as we go along, and you better obey our orders. That's where we are. So in our little burg of Rogue River, we were going to have a racial equality march, I guess you would say. City denied the permit. And when the group tried to get the park permit to rent the park to where they were going to have the barbecue and, a little gathering, maybe some speeches, not electrified. Somebody got the word out, and just as they were in line to get the permit, somebody else got the permit. Of course, there was the big social media push. I've been pushed off myself, as you know, off of Facebook, so I'm not really following it as much. But there was the big push to get all these stormtroopers in their trucks and make a big show up and down the state, and we had our contingent. Well, before that happened, though, there were so many credible threats to the marchers that they moved the march, decided not to have a march. They were going to gather in front of City Hall, which they did, and then drive to a little town up the Evans Creek. It has a beautiful covered bridge. Some people call it Wimmer, some people call it Weimer. But there's a community center there, an old school built by the WPA. Oh my God, socialism. And it's an old school, meaning that no one goes there anymore. Because, But they made it into a great community center, and they have events there, and it's huge, has athletic fields. It's a big park. So they were going to meet there. They got the permit there. No political affiliations involved with the Evans Community Center. Just a destination to have an event. And the diesel trucks that, what is that called? Rolling smoke? Roll tide, roll smoke. They were all out with their MAGA flags and the United States flag. How dare they appropriate the United States flag? They cannot have that flag. And every time they fly it, they disrespect it. Every time. They should be tried for violating the Flag Act and thrown into jail just for that. So anyway, we had our little, I wouldn't call them little, there was a couple of dozen trucks revving up, being really loud. Everybody put glass packs in their muffler system. A few had the rolling smoke BS. Lots of flipping off of old ladies and moms with little kids. So apparently we are the enemy of the state because we are so violent. We are so violent because we use ballots, and they cannot stand that. They have to go in and clean up a town who voted down that asshole at the top. And his cronies. Pretty much relegated him to the southern part of the state, unfortunately, where I reside. Damn it. What's on the rest of the menu here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, with Biden's polling numbers up and Trump's down, I guess I alluded to all of that already. Expect more Trump-inspired violence, obstruction of Congress, and some really crazy-ass tweeting. And it's already begun today. It even started before today. I mean, technically, but it's really been increased. There's something else coming down other than just the fact that his polling numbers are down indeed. On the rest of the menu, key air monitors remain offline after Laura hit the Louisiana oil and gas hub, and no one knows why. Yet they have an idea because some of them were actually destroyed by the storm. Wildfires again threaten California's wine country and all the businesses and everything else ancillary to that part of California. And worries about coronavirus forces election officials to get creative. Well, thankfully, after the break, we move to the chef's table, where police forcibly rebuffed far-right extremists who stormed the German parliament following a protest against the country's pandemic restrictions. How dare they? And a French military officer is held on suspicion of spying for Russia's GRU. Oh, they're finally catching up with him. Maybe we should too. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. So much time on a Monday morning rant, I will just abbreviate and just let you know, since you already know where the chat room link is and that is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and that link is at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You already know that. Oh, we've updated our homepage too, because we're making a line in the sand. We stand with Black Lives Matter. We need to find more and better Democrats, which we have done, and we are putting them up against, well, the brown shirt stormtroopers and the QAnon types. What are they? Anyway, we're going to vote them out of office and keep them from taking over anymore. So there. And you also know where our Patreon link is at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com and how important that is. So thank you for that. And you also know that if you want to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And that you should follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, because I put up the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And that you could follow the show on Twitter at at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. So I don't really need to tell you any of that. You already know. Alrighty, let's dive right into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. It is out of the Associated Press by Ellen Nickmeyer. Yes, Nickmeyer. Hazardous emissions from a chlorine plant fire from abruptly shuttered oil and gas refineries and still to be assessed plant damage are seeping into the air after Hurricane Laura, regulators say, but some key state and federal monitors to alert the public of air dangers remain offline in Louisiana. While the chlorine fire was being monitored as a potential health threat, Louisiana environmental spokesman Greg Langley says he knows of no other major industrial health risk from storms in the state. He said restoring power and water was a bigger priority. Yes. If your water is poison, it's better just to give it to you than to find out if it is now. But some Louisiana residents and environmental advocates say a shortage of solid government information on the state of air is typical, with dozens of petroleum, petrochemical, and other industrial sites. Louisiana is home to communities with some of the nation's highest cancer risks, so if you give them the numbers, they're going to use them against you. What do you think this is, a representative democracy? No, this is a crime cartel. Brian Melly and Aaron Rainen of the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. With an early harvest already underway, a wildfire a few miles west of John Butcher's ranch added new urgency to getting his Pinot Noir grapes off the vine. If flames didn't do any damage to the delicate fruit, ash and smoke certainly would. You know, they ought to just market that smoky essence that the grapes acquire. You know, they could, but they won't. Butcher hired an extra crew, and they finished the task before dawn last Wednesday in the quaint wine country destination of Healdsburg. Remarkably early in the year for a grape that is often not harvested until the end of September. It was just a race to get it done, Butcher said, his voice hoarse, after 3 days of almost no sleep and working in occasionally smoky conditions. 3 of the past 4 years, major wildfires have burned in Napa and Sonoma counties, charring vineyards, burning down a historic winery, and sending plumes of smoke above the neatly tended rows of vines rolling across scenic hills. Let alone all the people that have to work there who still continue to work there in these terrible smoking conditions. While the vast majority of vineyards, winemaking facilities, and tasting rooms that lure tourists from around the world have escaped damage, the perception of the area being on fire yet again has not helped business. Well, we're also in a pandemic. You would think that might have some kind of impact, but I don't know. This is wine we're talking about. I should say some really good wine, probably the best in the world. And I'm not being, nationalist at all. No, really, I'm not. This year, you throw COVID on it, and what did we do to deserve this? Said Corey Beck, winemaking chief at Francis Ford Coppola Winery. We really hurt more from the lack of tourists. That has been our Achilles heel during this time. Lightning-sparked wildfires west of Sonoma County and east of Napa 2 weeks ago coincided with the start of the harvest for some grape varieties. That's much earlier than devastating fires last year and in 2017 that erupted in October, when nearly all the grapes were off the vine and in the process of being converted to wine. The early fires pose a threat if they persist, and heavy smoke blankets the region for several days before the grapes are picked. That can lead to smoke taint, an undesirable burnt taste in wine made from grapes with skins permeated by smoke. I still say, if people are able to appreciate the taste of charred tobacco, or how about moldy dirt? I mean, come on, that's on the agenda for wine tasting. I think that they could have smoky air. Smith of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The coronavirus has upended everyday life in ways big and small. What happens when those disruptions overlap with voting? Thousands of state and local election officials across the U.S. are sharing ideas and making accommodations to ensure that voters and polling places are safe amid an unprecedented pandemic. So here's some virus-related obstacles voters could face during this unprecedented presidential election, along with some of the solutions being tried. closures and curtailed hours. What if you need a voter registration form or absentee ballot application and all the normal go-to places are closed? Well, the most recent American Library Association survey found that 62% of U.S. libraries, which are sources for voting documents, were fully closed, while another 26% were offering only curbside service. Likewise, the vast majority of state motor vehicle departments, the largest source of voter registrations nationally and of voter IDs needed in some states, are operating on limited hours at reduced capacity or by appointment only. Benjamin Hovland, chairman of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, said 40 states have online voter registration, a particular benefit during the pandemic. The commission has beefed up its website at www.vote.gov with links to register in all 50 states. So there you go. Polling place contamination. Well, they're taking care of that, and that shouldn't make you afraid, but do need to take care. As an example of how seriously they're responding, California issued 50 pages of instructions to its election boards last month, calling for site-specific virus prevention plans and extensive training. That's on top of CDC recommended guidelines that include social distancing, wearing masks, and frequent hand washing. So we're going to go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, who's got the power? Warning, tiny spoilers. Okay, really quickly. Project Power, sci-fi action film, not a superhero film. Project Power is a hip-hop urban dystopia set in a poor section of New Orleans where a new drug called Power has hit the streets. The drug gives you one superpower for 5 minutes only, and the same one every time. Some powers are harmless to you, some hurt you, some straight out kill you. Our story follows Frank, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, a white cop who takes power because now the criminals do, Art, Jamie Foxx, a black ex-soldier searching for his kidnapped daughter, and the film's true lead character played by Dominic Fishback, Robin, a black teen who deals power to pay for her mom's meds. It looks cool, the acting's good, the action's good but forced, the relationships are meh and forced, but what really strikes me is how the movie calls out current injustice issues but only to flirt with them. Like our cop Frank is crooked because he buys and uses this illegal drug, and he does brutalize a criminal when he's on power, but the dude is white and the film announces it. So we still have hero cop, have to save the city, no black lives threatened. Speaking of black lives, with Art's daughter and with Robin, the movie is centered around saving 2 young black women, but it's only a nod to critiques of systemic disenfranchisement. Why say I? Art tells Robin that as a black woman, the system is designed to keep her down. So his solution? Use what you're really good at to earn financial success. Turns out Robin raps. 2 white directors and a white screenwriter, of course she raps. But think about the movie's politics here. The system is unbeatable. There's no overturning it, no rejecting it, no protesting it. You have to work it. And notice that's the same thing the bad guys are doing. They've got this wonder drug, and their main thought is, how do we monetize it? For me, at one point, when Art trashes the bad guys, he ironically gives us Project Power's theme. Power goes to where it always goes, to the people that already have it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back in our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen. Every year, salmon come home to Alaska's frigid rivers to mate, lay their eggs, and die. The state's salmon runs are some of the biggest in the world, but over the past few decades, those big salmon runs have featured ever smaller salmon.
You know, you talk to people up there who've been fishing for a long time, and they're definitely able to tell you that, you know, we just don't see those really large, old salmon that we used to see.
Krista Oak, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Oak and colleagues at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and elsewhere analyzed records of fish size going back to the 1950s. They included data on some 12.5 million salmon, each of which had to be measured by someone from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And there's no question about it, salmon have shrunk. Sockeye salmon today are 2.1% shorter than their ancestors. Chum salmon are 2.4% shorter, and coho are 3.3% shorter. Chinook or king salmon showed the greatest declines at 8%. That's an average difference of more than 2 inches in length. The study is in the journal Nature Communications. The researchers haven't nailed down the exact reasons behind this trend, but their analysis suggests that climate change and competition with wild and hatchery-raised salmon both play a role. They also discovered that much of the change in body size is due to fish returning from the ocean at a younger age now than in the past. Oak says fish could be returning earlier because they're reaching maturity faster for some reason, or because the ocean has become a riskier place for older salmon to survive.
What could be happening is the salmon that otherwise would have returned large and old just aren't making it that long.
Whatever the cause, this size shift has massive ramifications for people and the environment. Oak and her team calculated that catching smaller fish may have already slashed the value of Alaska's commercial salmon fisheries by 21%. It's also likely reduced the food available to subsistence fishers, many of whom rely on stores of salmon to get them through the long, harsh winter, by as much as 26%. On the ecological side, the researchers estimated that smaller fish lay 16% fewer eggs, which could depress salmon populations in the future. And the salmon bring 28% fewer nutrients into the watersheds where they spawn, according to the study.
After they breed and die, their carcasses actually fertilize freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems with these marine-derived nutrients that are really important and that get used by all kinds of animals like bears and songbirds and even taken up into trees.
With no single factor to blame for shrinking salmon, there's no obvious fix, Oak says. But there are still plenty of fish in the sea. They're just smaller than they used to be. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The discovery of penicillin in 1928 by Alexander Fleming was one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century. It's hard to imagine a world before the development of what many consider to be miracle drugs. However, just 90 years ago, antibiotics weren't available. Thanks to antibiotics, some common illnesses such as strep throat are now easily treated, whereas in the past they often led to serious complications. Antibiotics serve an important role in keeping you and your loved ones healthy, but it's important to remember that antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Most common infections such as colds, flu, most sore throats, bronchitis, and many sinus and ear infections are caused by viruses and do not respond to antibiotic treatment. These infections can be overcome by simply treating the symptoms and letting the illness run its course. Unfortunately, antibiotics have often been overused, resulting in decreased effectiveness and an increase in antibiotic-resistant diseases. Antibiotic resistance, or the increased ability of bacteria to survive in the presence of antibiotics has become a major public health threat that we all need to help fight. When a person takes antibiotics, they are at risk for possibly having a bad reaction to these drugs. Some side effects can be quite serious, or even life-threatening in the case of an allergic reaction or severe diarrhea. This is why it is very important to only use antibiotics when they are absolutely needed, and not for viral infections. Talk to your healthcare professional about the best treatment for your illness. If it is caused by a virus, follow his or her recommendation for treating the symptoms. Learn more about appropriate antibiotic use and how to feel better when you don't need an antibiotic by visiting CDC's Get Smart, Know When Antibiotics Work website at cdc.gov/getsmart/community.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Russia is actively interfering again in the 2020 election. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that was the conclusion of the Democratic senators contained in the 1,000-page report of the Senate Intelligence Committee released in August. The committee unanimously, on a bipartisan basis, concluded that Russia involved itself deeply in the 2016 U.S. election in order to elect Donald Trump president. There was one major point of disagreement, but not about that fact. The Republican senators emphasized in their addendum that the committee found no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. The Democratic senators highlighted that the report itself unambiguously shows that the Trump campaign cooperated with Russia. Cooperation with Russia versus collusion with Russia? Look, it is an important issue, but it's not the critical question today. The critical question today is how is Russia trying to influence the 2020 election? Using and manipulating social media, creating numerous false organizations and social media accounts, supporting third-party candidates who could change the outcome in closely contested swing states, more, worse? And critically, what is the United States government doing to prevent this foreign adversary from putting its thumb on the electoral scale? A question that needs answering now. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day the Battle of Blair Mountain raged in Logan County, West Virginia. Members of the United Mine Workers of America were attempting to organize the minefields in the southern part of the state. The efforts to bring workers to union was met with violent resistance. The miners armed themselves and marched south. As many as 10,000 miners joined the march. They met armed company men at Blair Mountain. In the battle that ensued, 1 million rounds were fired. The mine owners even hired private planes to drop bombs on Union miners. The U.S. Army intervened and the battle ended. Despite not being successful in their march, the bloody battle brought national attention to the violence in the coal fields. But that was not the last battle for Blair Mountain. In 2011, there was a proposal to bring mountaintop removal mining to Blair Mountain. This type of mining blasts off large chunks of a mountain surface to get at the coal seams below. Protesters stood against the proposal. They argued it would be environmentally devastating to the area. They also argued that it would blast away one of the most important sites of labor history in the nation. Some coal miners took exception to the protests. In a CNN documentary on the conflict, one union miner said, quote, "Mountaintop removal is what built this house, sends that little girl to school, provides insurance for my wife." But another miner joined in the protest against removal. He told CNN that miners had been, quote, "brainwashed to think, oh, I can't have a job unless it's a mountaintop removal job." In 2014, the state prohibited surface mining at Blair Mountain. for now, but that is subject to change. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high, about mid-80s to 90 or so. They say 86. I say, maybe 85 to 90. Overnight lows will be in the upper 50s, low 60s. Today, sunshine and clouds mixed. Winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour, continuing from that direction and velocity. Tonight, and of course, later on, tonight, will be put into an active heat advisory warning because it looks like for the next couple of weeks we'll be in triple digits. Oh, indeed, a mainly sunny sky tomorrow. Highs around 101, which means probably around 105, with winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and that's where the heat comes from, right off of the desert. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County here in the southern part of Oregon are now at 776, with 2 confirmed deceased. We will get updated numbers later on in the day. These numbers do not reflect all of the weekend, but tomorrow we will have those numbers, and unfortunately they will be going up. Pollen is rated as none, and that's something interesting. The air quality index for the region is good at 30 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains high at 7, so take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.03 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 48%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 65 degrees and fair. Paris is 70 and sunny. Rome is 65 and partly cloudy with a thunder and electrical storm advisory that could knock out their electrical grid. Kyiv is 90 and fair. Kabul is 73 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 82 and fair. Tokyo is 75 degrees and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees Fahrenheit with fog. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Frank Jordan's of the AP brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Far-right extremists tried to storm the German Parliament building on Saturday following a protest against the country's pandemic restrictions, but were intercepted by police and forcibly removed. The incident occurred after a day-long demonstration by tens of thousands of people opposed to the wearing of masks and other government measures intended to stop the spread of the new coronavirus. Police ordered the protesters to disband halfway through their march around Berlin after participants refused to observe social distancing rules, but a rally near the capital's iconic Brandenburg Gate took place as planned. Footage of the incident showed hundreds of people, some waving the flag of the German Reich of 1871 to 1918, and other far-right banners running toward the Reichstag building and up the stairs. Police confirmed that several people had broken through a cordon in front of Parliament and entered the staircase of the Reichstag building, but not the building itself. Germany's top security official condemned the incident. The Reichstag building is a workplace of our parliament and therefore the symbolic center of our liberal democracy, Interior Minister Horst Seehofer said in a statement. It's unbearable that vandals and extremists would misuse it, he said, calling on authorities to show zero tolerance. Well, that's rather Teutonic. Earlier, thousands of far-right extremists had thrown bottles and stones at police outside the Russian embassy. Police detained about 300 people throughout the day. Berlin's regional government had tried to ban the protests, warning that extremists could use them as a platform, and citing anti-mask rallies earlier this month where rules intended to stop the virus from being spread further were not respected. Protest organizers successfully appealed the decision, though a court ordered them to ensure social distancing. Failure to enforce that measure prompted Berlin police to dissolve the march while it was still in progress.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at The Guardian bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The French government is investigating a senior military officer over a security breach. The defense minister has said, following a report the person was suspected of spying for Russia. What I can confirm is that a senior officer is facing legal proceedings for a security breach, Florence Parley said. She gave no further details. According to reports, the officer was a lieutenant colonel stationed with NATO in Italy and has been placed under investigation on suspicion of spying for Russia. He speaks Russian and was seen in Italy with a man identified as an agent of the GRU. He is suspected of having supplied sensitive documents to Russian intelligence. A judicial source said the officer had been indicted and jailed on charges involving intelligence with a foreign power that undermines the fundamental interests of the nation. He is being prosecuted for delivering information to a foreign power, collecting information harming the fundamental interests of the nation with a view to delivering them to a foreign power, and compromising the secrecy of national defense, the source said. The man was arrested by French intelligence agency DGSI as he was preparing to leave for Italy at the end of his holidays in France and was being held at a prison in Paris. Well, good. Now do us, the U.S. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin.